All right, welcome to the Viking Age podcast. I'm your host, Adam Patrick. I'm the editor and lead writer for thevikingage.com. And as always, I'm joined here by Chris Schad, who writes for us here at the Viking Age, as well as Bring Me the News and Zone Coverage. Before we start today's show, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this on YouTube, like the video. Also follow the Viking Age on Twitter and Facebook, and the podcast version of this show is available on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. So go check that out. Before we get started today, Chris, I'm pretty sure you know that the Chiefs won the Super Bowl yesterday in Arizona against the Eagles. That's our first topic. But do you know the three players from the Chiefs who used to play for the Vikings that won the Super Bowl ring yesterday?
There's Jerick McKinnon. I don't think
One.
Mike Hughes is there anymore.
Nope.
I don't know the other two.
There's Amir Smith-Marset, who a lot of people
yeah.
A lot of people are mad at me now for mentioning that he has more rings than Kirk Cousins. And Blake Bell, just a tight end who used to be with the Vikings randomly back in the day, probably like 2015, 2016.
Yeah, the Belldozer. They used to use him in that package in Oklahoma. I can't remember who was the starter that year, but yeah, they had him come in on the goal line.
Was DeMarco Murray was that back then?
That could be. I mean, that's a long time ago if it is, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, well, those are your Super Bowl champions. On the Eagles side, they lost. They had Linval Joseph, Anthony Harris was on the practice squad. Marcus Epps, I think, was a safety. I think there might have been someone else, but I can't think. And Jonathan Gannon was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles, and he was on the Viking staff for a while under Mike Zimmer. Those are your Vikings connections to Super Bowl 57. All right, so the Chiefs beat the Eagles on Sunday, Super Bowl 57, 38-35. The Eagles actually led 24-14 at the half, but then the Chiefs came out in the second half, outscored the Eagles 24-11 in the final two quarters to get their second Super Bowl win since Patrick Mahomes became their starting quarterback in 2018. And even though they came up short in the Super Bowl, the Eagles still made some major strides this season after their 2021 season came to an end with a loss in the first round of the playoffs. You know, the Eagles and their second-year head coach finished at the top of the NFC with a 14-3 record, and they represented the NFC in the Super Bowl. As we know, the Vikings are coming off a season that ended in the first round of the playoffs, and their young head coach will be looking to lead his team even further in his second season with the franchise. So, Chris, what needs to happen for the Vikings to be next year's version of the Eagles and represent the NFC in the Super Bowl?
Well, I had Matthew Collar on the Homer Horn podcast, which is out right now. So you can check that out wherever you get your favorite shows, Apple and Spotify. And he was talking about just being honest with yourself at where the Vikings are. Like watching the game yesterday, I don't think the Vikings are close to being a Super Bowl team. They won 13 games last year, but when you look at everything and, this is caving into the whole fraud metric, but they won 13 games and every stat was the same as the previous year. Basically, the only thing that changed is Kirk Cousins made a couple of drives and the Vikings won 13 games and got a home playoff loss instead of a, 8-9 season where they just go into the abyss. I think that they need to look at this roster and just or look at the Chiefs and the Eagles, like what they brought. They have big offensive lines that the Chiefs went out. They were super aggressive. They turned it around over the course of 1 year. And this year, they didn't give up any sacks in the Super Bowl, probably because the Eagles were like slipping and sliding on the turf that was out there. But that's another story for the game. The Eagles, the entire game, anytime it was 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever, QB sneak, Jalen Hurts picked it up and they were just able to move guys off the spot. When was the last time you saw a Minnesota Vikings offensive line move guys around? Like
late 90s?
Usually it's the other way around.
When they had I said late 90s when they had like all those 300 plus pounders. push
David
people around.
Dixon and Jeff
Yeah,
Christie and
yeah.
Randall McDaniel, who's
Corey
the
Stringer.
absolute bomb. I mean, I'm just kind of naming old offensive linemen. I don't think they all played at the same time, but that was kind of it. Now we have Ed Ingram, who's leading the NFL in pressures, and Ezra Cleveland, who's third, and Garrett Bradbury, who's basically like a sack of potatoes. You look at the defense, they are fast on the back end and they are strong up front. The Vikings don't have that at all. They have very slow secondary players. They have very slow linebackers, and their defensive line basically gets no push up front. So there's that. Skill position players. I mean, I'm just kind of basically going down the list here. Skill position players like, Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen are in contract negotiations right now. And I mean, those players are older, they're slower, they're not contributing at the level that they used to at the beginning of their career. And then there's the quarterback. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, it's not Kirk's fault. And I love my Kirky, and Kirky should be the sign him to a 5-year extension. Saw that this afternoon, and that was just okay. Like, when you look at Jalen Hurts and you look at Patrick Mahomes, I think they ran for about 150 yards on the ground and 3 touchdowns, all coming from Jalen Hurts. Patrick Mahomes had a bad ankle, and he's like, screw it. It's the Super Bowl. I'm going to start running around all over the place. Like, every time I think of Kirk Cousins, I think of 4th and 8, because the whole season we basically treated him like a quarterback Ken doll. We put chains on him so he could be like Joe Burrow. He was doing all the comebacks and stuff. 4th and 8 against the Giants. I'm not comfortable throwing it to Justin Jefferson. And he throws a little check. Like, people are crapping on Jalen Hurts for that last pass. Kirk Cousins checks that down 3 yards and hopes TJ Hawkinson, he goes 70 yards or whatever for the, like, and you look at the rosters too. Kirk Cousins is making $36.25 million next year. Patrick Mahomes is made $34 million last year. Kirk Cousins costs the same price as Patrick Mahomes. So, like, no, I don't think the Vikings are close to contending for a Super Bowl, because there is a lot that needs to do. And that is why this offseason is going to be so important, because if they screw this up, they will become the Lions, or they'll become something worse. They'll probably be something that's like stuck in the middle, like Jeff Fisher's Titans.
Ooh. I'm glad you said Titans and not Rams, because they were even more in the middle than the Titans, because the Titans were actually pretty good with Jeff Fisher back in the day. Couple seasons. There's a couple things that the Vikings would need to do in order to take that next step, which would be some of the things that the Eagles did, which was, trade for players. They didn't really they didn't draft a whole lot of I feel like they didn't draft a whole lot of players this past year to improve their roster. They used their draft picks to acquire guys like AJ Brown, to acquire, a safety like Gardner Johnson or whatever. They traded for Darius Slay, I believe, the year before. So they're using their draft picks to acquire assets. And that might be something that the Vikings want to do. And the Rams did something similar with Matthew Stafford and a couple of other guys too. So is that the path that the Vikings want to take, or do they want to build their roster through the draft? Because, I mean, you have a season, you go 13-4, you probably don't want to tear it down next year. You still got a bunch of young guys. You got Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, a bunch of young offensive linemen. You still got plenty to build around, so you don't want to just completely tear it down. But, do you want to move forward the next year, or do you want to kind of tread water for a year or two and then take a big step forward? So I think that's what they have to figure out. Given the turn. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I just want to point this out. I think they just need to clarify the difference between players that are shot and players that can still help. Like, just because you're over the age of whatever doesn't mean that like Harrison Smith could still be good next year. That's something out, Adam Thielen's out politicking for his next job or whatever that is. I mean, Dalvin Cook, is he effective or is he shot? Like, they have to ask themselves questions all throughout the roster.
Yeah, they have a lot to figure out. They're over the cap, so they got to figure out how to get just under the cap first, which they can do with a bunch of extensions and stuff for guys that actually deserve them. But given the turnaround that the Eagles had, they won the Super Bowl in 2017, and then they kind of went through a little bit of a struggle for a little bit there. Drafted Jalen Hurts, and then they're back in the Super Bowl this year in 2023. What, 6 seasons, 5 seasons later? Given their time for a turnaround, how much time would you give Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah to try and get the Vikings into the Super Bowl, or is that? I mean, that should be the goal, but like, I don't know. I don't even know what their goals are right now at this point. Like, how much time would you give the new regime to get to the Super Bowl?
It depends on what the Wilfs think. Like, it doesn't matter what I think. Are the Wilfs just so stubborn and want to be relevant every year? Like, they think they're relevant, but they're not. Like, nobody thought about the Vikings yesterday outside of anybody in Minnesota or anybody with purple in their closet. Like, the Vikings are an irrelevant team. The other 30 teams in the NFL that did not make the Super Bowl are an irrelevant team. They should be aiming for a Super Bowl, but it just seems like the Wilfs want to be like the Steelers or the Ravens, who are never bad. They just turn out 9 or 10 win seasons and they get bounced right away. When I think about Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi, how much are they going to be allowed to cook, so to speak? Because if they're able to do what they really want to do, then they should get, 2 or 3 years to get to the Super Bowl. Because I think this year they need to reset the cap. They need to figure things out. Maybe it's a natural tank, as Matthew Collar calls it, and just get to a point where they have draft assets, where they can take a quarterback. We've talked about the 2024 class ad nauseum on this podcast because it appears to be a buyer's quarterback group. Now that could change between now and, the 2024 draft, but they need to make moves for the future. Like the competitive rebuild stuff, it's not a thing. It's not a thing. You're either you're all in or you're all out.
Yeah, I know a lot of people have been bringing up the fact that the Chiefs were able to win the Super Bowl with, one player taking up more than 12% or 13% of the salary cap for the first time ever. So obviously, that can be done now. And immediately in my head, I'm like, so 1 out of 57 is a reason to not go along with the formula that's worked for everyone else, and use the rookie contract scale.
And Kirk Cousins isn't Patrick Mahomes. Let's get that
exactly,
out of the way.
Exactly.
There's some quarterbacks where you just say, okay, we'll make it work. And you know what the Chiefs did? They paid Patrick Mahomes. Tyreek Hill wanted number 1 money. It's like, yeah, Patrick Mahomes can do this. We'll just get rid of it. And Tyreek Hill's a damn good receiver. But I mean, when you have Patrick Mahomes, you pay him.
Patrick Mahomes now has won 2 MVPs and 2 Super Bowls in 5 years as a starter. Tom Brady won maybe that many as a starter, but I don't think he was MVP as much as Mahomes was in his first 5 years. And yeah, Kirk Cousins like
1 playoff win where Kyle Rudolph pushed off.
And I appreciate the optimism because you saw what they were able to do last year with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, win 13 games. But when you get to the playoffs and when things matter and when there's actual pressure, when it's not a middle of the year game against the Bills, it doesn't really matter. Like, Kirk Cousins doesn't really show up. And until he does, you can't really say like, oh, that's not fair. Why? He's going into what, year 11, year 12? Like,
he will be 35 years old next.
Until he proves otherwise, which he could. He could. Okay, I'm not gonna dismiss that because he took steps in the right direction last season. Things kind of crumbled at the end, but he did take more risks during the season, and maybe Kevin O'Connell will be able to convince him to do that more in the upcoming season. But until he proves otherwise, like, people are like, "Can you win a Super Bowl with Kirk Cousins?" And like, the dude hasn't even got to an NFC Championship. Let's worry about that first before we're like, we can win a Super Bowl with him. No, like, let's not do that. But like, I saw the salary cap stuff today, and I'm like, Point proven because Patrick Mahomes, because maybe the greatest quarterback in NFL history was able to do it. Anybody can do it. Like, no, that's not that. That's like the Trent Dilfer thing when people are like Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Yeah, he had the greatest defense in the history of the NFL, carrying him to the Super Bowl. So let's not act like it was Trent Dilfer carrying the Ravens to the Super Bowl. All right, enough with the Super Bowl. Did you watch most of it, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, of course
Yeah.
I did. But
It's a Super Bowl. I think I saw most of the first half and a little bit of the second half. Saw the halftime show. I liked Rihanna. She was good. I forgot how many like hits she actually had. I was like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
She's got a very deep catalog.
She does.
I think that's and the fact, she's pregnant and she's like on this
right?
thing and it's just like going up and down and up and down. And I'm like watching it going like, obviously I know nothing about being pregnant, but I don't think I'd like want to be like, I don't know how high she was up in the air.
A lot
it's
of
like,
well, a lot of people in her position probably would have thrown up. So I'm surprised that she was able to hold it together.
That would have been awesome, actually.
That would have been hilarious. People would have been like, oh, she's pregnant. That would have been a dead giveaway. All right. So ESPN came out with some way too early 2023 power rankings because, of course, as we have to do the day after Super Bowl, we can't rest. We have to get right into next season. Less than 24 hours after the Super Bowl ended. And this might come as a surprise to some people, but they actually have the Vikings as the number 9 team in the NFL, top 10 team in the NFL right now. Ranked ahead of the Vikings are the Dolphins at number 8, the Chargers at number 7, the Cowboys at number 6, Bills at 5, Bengals at 4, 49ers at 3, Eagles at 2, and Chiefs at 1. And a few surprises, the Lions are at 12, the Packers are at 16, and the Rams are at 22. So, in your opinion, too high, too low for the Vikings heading into next season?
I think it's too high. Like I said, I think this team overachieved last year, and with the schedule that's coming up, I mean, it's a gauntlet. Like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers twice probably,
Russell Wilson.
Who knows? Sean Payton might be able to get more out of him.
You never know. Yep.
You never know. I mean, again, this team needs to be realistic with himself. And I'm not saying like blow everything up and turn this into a Madden franchise. Mm-hmm. Like, again, is this player shot or is this player somebody that can help us? And if they're shot, they gotta get rid of people. I don't care if they're from Minnesota or Miami. Like they need to go. And I mean, it's just frustrating because I think the last couple of years we've seen that this team has loyalties that are like, we worked a restructured contract with Adam Thielen and Eric Kendricks and all these guys, and we kicked all this money down the road. Eventually the bill comes due. And it's just frustrating to see the Vikings just continue to spin their wheels.
Yeah. I'd agree that it's high. I probably would have put them either where the Lions are at 12 or maybe a little lower. Just because we saw, they were 13-4, but once they got the playoffs, like they couldn't do much. Now they did get a new defensive coordinator in Brian Flores. So maybe that should help them on the defensive side of the ball. Like it really can't get any worse. I hope not. So that should help them progress. But then you gotta bank on the offense kind of either staying the same or getting better next year. Teams are gonna have tape on the Vikings offense now. That full year of tape to kind of analyze what they like to do now. I would expect Kevin O'Connell to add some more wrinkles to his offense this offseason and try and get Justin Jefferson even more involved and maybe some other guys involved too as well. But I'd say too high too as well, unfortunately. I just don't think they have the pieces right now to be a true contender. Now, on the other hand, the NFC, aside from the Eagles, I know the Niners have a good defense, but they got a lot of question marks at quarterback right now. But aside from the Eagles, like, How many teams in the NFC are better than the Vikings right now?
I would say the Eagles. Here you go. You're going to laugh at it, but I would say the 49ers
Mm-hmm.
are probably better. And I'm also thinking this from a what are they going to do this offseason standpoint. So I would say the Lions are going to be better than the Vikings next year because they have two, what is it, top 7 picks or
Oh
something. I
yeah,
think,
yep.
I mean, they're going to get a pair of studs out of this draft, which is a very good draft. So, I mean, the momentum they have, Ben Johnson's coming back for them as their offensive coordinator. I
Oh
would
yep.
put the Lions ahead of them. Then, Dallas will be good. The Giants, I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but
Will Dallas be good? Didn't they just hire Brian Schottenheimer as their offensive coordinator?
they did.
Let's not.
Well, and Mike McCarthy's calling plays, so yeah, it could go downhill real quick. I mean,
Yeah,
you got a point. I mean,
the Giants should be better. I feel like they
right.
can add some pieces, and they'll have their defense will still be pretty good, and maybe they can add a receiver. They might want one of those.
They're a fringe playoff team.
Mm-hmm.
The Vikings are. Like I think they're not in that like upper echelon group. Their best hope is that the rest of the division sucks again so they can win it. Because that's basically what they did last year. They just won a whole bunch of games early. The rest of the division stumbled all over itself and they wound up winning the division.
Yeah, I think definitively I would go. Yeah, the Eagles and Niners probably right now, just because they were able to do so well this season. But other than that, I feel like you could make an argument that they're on the same level as a lot of the other teams. The Lions, the Cowboys, the Giants. The NFC South looks. I don't even know what that is right now. With Tom Brady gone, you got the Panthers in there, the Saints, the Falcons. What are the Seahawks going to look like? They're bringing Geno Smith back. Are the Rams going to be better? Matthew Stafford's back. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray's dealing with his torn ACL. So, I don't know. I feel like it's pretty wide open. Now, the Vikings are going to have a first place schedule next year. So, that'll obviously play a part in that. But I don't know. And I feel like the Eagles are going to regress from this year. It seems like it's just for whatever reason, the team that loses in the Super Bowl typically does not do well the following year. Some have even missed the playoffs. So I would expect the Eagles to regress next year, and I don't know. I feel like it's pretty wide open, and then the offseason will have a lot to do with that. We'll see what happens because who knows what's going to happen the next few weeks. We really have no idea. All right. Last topic. I am one who never likes to miss an opportunity to talk about former Vikings wide receiver and Hall of Famer, Randy Moss. So today, Monday, February 13th, is Moss's 46th birthday. Happy birthday, Randy Moss. Moss is only about 6 months older than Tom Brady, who just retired from the NFL. To put that in perspective, here's a question for you. Should the Vikings retire Randy Moss's number 84 jersey?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that, the current wave of Vikings fans, like you go back to the early 90s and there wasn't a lot to attach yourself to with this team. I mean, they were getting threatened with blackouts. There were rumors that were going to move to Los Angeles. Randy Moss showed up in 1998 and basically transformed this team into what it is today. And I think he's one of those players that when you talk about the history of the franchise, you have to mention him. The problem with the Vikings is that they went crazy retiring numbers like at the beginning of their existence. And like in football, like, basketball, there's 5 players. So, I mean, you have all those numbers. You can use like whatever you want to retire whatever you want. It probably doesn't matter. But in football, especially with like 90 guys in training camp, you need all the numbers available. So, I mean, yeah, you can't like unretire numbers, but I mean, if you retire, like, I think Adrian Peterson's number should be retired too in Vikings history, but that's another conversation for another day. I like Randy Moss 100%. He should have his number 84 retired. And, with Irv Smith Jr. probably on the way out, it's going to be another opportunity for the Vikings to do it. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like Mike Zimmer might not have been someone who really cares about that stuff. Like he embraced the legends or whatever, but I feel like Kevin O'Connell's kind of more brought those older guys in to kind of tell them about the current team, about like the history of the team and everything like that. So I feel like Kevin O'Connell we might have a better chance of this happening with him running the show. Um, I will say with that there were new number rules created in 2021. So now there are 59 different jersey numbers that a receiver could potentially wear because they can wear 1 through
Oh yeah.
19, 20 through 49, and 80 through 89. With the Vikings, there's 56 different numbers because they retired 10 for Fran Tarkenton, 80 for Chris Carter, and 88 for Alan Page. Um, so yeah, I don't want to see another Irv Smith wearing 84. I don't want to see
Or
Chad
Bucky
Beebe
Hodges.
or Michael Jenkins wearing 84. Like, come on, man. Like you said, he literally saved the franchise from moving to San Antonio. Um, so let's give the guys due. He's in the Hall of Fame. He changed the game. He made a lot of the Vikings fans, like our age, became Vikings fans because of Randy Moss in that era. Um, like he's an icon in the NFL, and it's odd that his number isn't retired yet by the Vikings, and hopefully they will do that soon because it's long overdue. Last one before we get out of here. I've heard some of this chatter, especially after the year Justin Jefferson had. Is Justin Jefferson already a better wide receiver than Randy Moss?
I think they're two different receivers. I think as far as a complete receiver goes, yes. I think
Ooh,
Justin Jefferson's a better receiver than Randy Moss. So Moss didn't want to go over the middle. He didn't want to, take the big hits and kind of
fair though.
jeopardize his career. Yeah, no, I mean it's smart. Like a lot
You
of
could get hit
people
back then.
a lot of people ripped on Moss and, well, he didn't want to go over the middle and he took plays off. Okay, the dude is literally running like 70-yard gassers on every play.
And he's a
Like if he's
stick.
not getting the ball, yeah. But
He's like 150 soaking wet.
yeah.
So like then
So
you got like Sean Taylor over the middle trying to take your head off. So I think
yeah.
he was fine for not doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Justin Jefferson's just a different receiver because he's a better route runner. He's he's just as good as a deep threat. I think Randy Moss is the greatest deep threat of all time, but Jefferson is just a multifaceted player that can do so many different things. I think he's an overall better receiver than Moss, but I think that Moss is just for what he did. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to explain. Like that's what I'm getting paid to do is put it into words, right? But I mean, it's still pretty. It's hard to do, but I
It is.
think
It
I
is.
lean yes.
All right. So you would say just all around you think he's better. Um
Yeah.
I'll say this. Jefferson Yes, Jefferson has more receiving yards and catches in his first 3 seasons than Moss had in his first 3 seasons in the NFL. But in Moss's first 3 seasons, he had more touchdowns, 43 to 26. That's a big margin. A higher yards per catch average, 18.4 to 14.9. That speaks to him being a big deep threat. A higher yards per target average, 10.7 to 10.1. One more first team All Pro selection, and I think we forget this. A third place MVP finish in 98. 98, he as a rookie, he finished third in the MVP voting. So, we heard a lot about Justin Jefferson being nominated this year, and he finished fifth, and that's cool. But Randy Moss did that too. So, Moss also went on to begin his Vikings career with 6 straight seasons with at least 1,200 receiving yards, and in 5 of those 6 seasons, he also had 10 touchdown catches. And listen, Jefferson is a very, very good receiver. But I think sometimes we get lost, like in the present moment, and kind of forget how good Randy Moss truly was, especially during an era that didn't really help out receivers as much as it does in the current version of the sport. I think if Randy Moss played today, he would be even better than he was in 98, 99, 2000, all those years, because like you said, he didn't want to go over the middle because he didn't want to get hit because they wouldn't throw a flag if you. They weren't considered defenseless receivers like they are now in this current version of the NFL. So I would still lean towards Moss. I think Jefferson is uh on the right track. I would agree with you. Like I would say, yeah, like maybe after the catch, route running. I don't. I think route running is kind of similar. I would say Moss is a better deep threat just because his speed is just ridiculous, especially early in his career. Um, but I would still lean towards Moss. Maybe that's my bias, but I think Jefferson's on the right track. Clearly, obviously. But I would still give the edge to Moss. That's my opinion. All right. I think that's all we have for today. Let's see. Coming up on the NFL schedule, we got what? The Combine, I think, in a few weeks. Free agency will start in the middle of March. Then it's gonna get crazy. It's gonna be the draft, it'll be minicamp before you know it. Like people talk about like the
Buckle
NFL,
up.
yeah, the NFL season. It's over. No. Like this, we're just getting started now. Like there's
Like
yeah, like
July is when it like ends for
yeah.
like a couple of weeks, and then it's like, all right, we're back. But
The end of June and Jaloon. What is
Jaloon.
Jaloon? The end of June and the beginning of July. There's like 3 or 4 week period where nothing's going on. That's it. The rest of the year is just full go NFL storylines, everything. We got to figure out where Aaron Rodgers is going. Got to figure out where what Derek Carr. I don't care where Derek Carr is going. It doesn't matter.
No.
It's going to the Saints. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it for today. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video. The audio version of this podcast will be available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to follow Viking Age on Twitter and Facebook. But until next time, which should be Thursday, Chris and I will talk to you later.